There was a time when I believed all myths were lies. Fairy tales, epics, stories of dying gods and rising kings. I cherished them, yes, but only as echoes from a world that never was. Christianity to me was the chief among them, a story perhaps noble, but no more true than boulder pierced by mistletoe or Osiris rising from the Nile. But something strange happened. What if, I asked myself, what if one myth turned out to be real, not merely meaningful, but historical? What if the very thing I dismissed as fantasy was the one story that actually happened? This is how I came to believe that Christianity is not just a myth, but the true myth, the myth that became fact. My first love was Norse mythology. I remember as a boy standing under grey English skies with Longfellow's saga of King Olaf in my hand and feeling as if I'd touched eternity. The crackling of frost giants, the soaring wings of Valkyries, the noble resignation of gods bound to die, it all filled me with a longing too vast for this world. We Germans have a word for it, Sehnsucht, an ache, a yearning, a homesickness for a land I've never seen. These myths, old and broken as they were, sang to something inside me that logic could never touch. They didn't make claims about atoms or empires. They simply told truths older than time, that good is worth dying for, that sacrifice redeems, that joy is bound up with sorrow, and that there is something beyond the veil of the world. I believed they were beautiful lies, and still I could not stop loving them. Even when I became an atheist, that ache never left me. That yearning for joy, sharp as grief, tender as light, haunted me. At Oxford I was immersed in logic, classics and philosophical skepticism. I fancied myself enlightened, free from childish tales and ecclesiastical dreams. I placed my trust in what could be measured and dissected. I bowed to the altar of reason. God to me was no more than a fairy godfather for the weak, and Christ, well, just another dying and rising deity, borrowed like so many from the pagan pantry. And yet, the myths I dismissed, they would not leave me alone. When I read Euripides or Beowulf, I felt more alive than I did reading the latest atheist tract. There was something in those old tales that stirred my soul, even as my mind told me to silence it. Was this mere nostalgia, or was my heart trying to tell me something my head refused to hear? It was a quiet evening in 1931. I walked beside the River Cherwell in Oxford with two friends, Hugo Dyson and J.R.R. Tolkien. You know Tolkien, perhaps, from his stories of Middle-earth, but before he was a writer, he was a believer, a Roman Catholic who believed that myth was not falsehood, but a forgotten language. We spoke of myths that night, not just Norse or Greek, but the Christian one too, and it was Tolkien who looked me in the eye and said something that split my world in two. He said, "Jack, Christianity is the one true myth. It's the myth that entered history." What he meant was this: all the other myths of dying gods, of heroes who descend into darkness and rise again, they are echoes, faint and broken, yes, but echoes of a deeper truth. In Christ, that truth took on flesh. God did not merely whisper from beyond the world, he stepped into it. He did not send a symbol, he became the man. The Creator entered the page of his own story, and suddenly I saw, not with my eyes, but with something deeper. Think of it this way. Suppose you are a playwright. You've written a grand story, a tragedy, a comedy, a drama all in one, but one day you step into the play yourself. You become one of the characters, not to destroy the script, but to fulfill it. That's what I came to believe Christ had done. The great myths of Prometheus, Orpheus, Odin, and Arthur, they are not wrong, they are not lies, they are dreams, and dreams prepare us for waking. Christianity was the waking. It contained the same pattern: sacrifice, death, resurrection, but now with a shocking twist. It actually happened. In a dusty province of Rome, under a nameless sky, God became man, not in metaphor, in blood, in breath, in bone, and that changed everything. Throughout my life, I had known a certain kind of joy, but it was unlike happiness, pleasure, or even contentment. It would come upon me like lightning, unpredictable, piercing, fleeting. It might arise from a line of poetry, the sight of a distant mountain, the sound of a melody half remembered, and then vanish, leaving behind not satisfaction, but longing. That Sehnsucht, was at the heart of all my desires. For years I thought it was a cruel trick, that the universe would give me a thirst for something that did not exist. But what if it was the opposite? What if that longing was not a failure, but a fingerprint? What if the very ache was a clue? Tolkien's idea, that myths expressed something true, opened a door. But it was this joy, this ache, this longing that pushed me through it. All desire has an object. We feel hunger, because food exists. We thirst, because there is water. Might not my longing for another world suggest that such a world exists? And what if the God behind the Christian myth, the incarnate Christ, was not only real, but the source of that joy? It's easy to think that all religions are the same, that Christianity is just one more voice in a noisy crowd, Zeus and Jehovah sharing the same cosmic stage. But when I truly looked, I saw something else. The pagan myths, they pointed upward, they reached, groped, imagined, they hinted at sacrifice, redemption, transformation, but they could not name the face behind the veil. Christianity, by contrast, came down, not man rising to God, but God stooping to man. Pagans imagined gods who suffer, but never truly die, heroes who fall, but never truly rise. In Christ, the myth becomes fact. He dies, buried, risen, witnessed, remembered in real time, by real people, in real history, and unlike other myths, it demanded something of me, not just awe, but allegiance, not just admiration, but surrender. It wasn't just a story to believe, it was a person to follow. Believing in God, let alone the God who died on a cross, was not a warm comfort for me. It was a shattering of all I had built, my pride, my autonomy, my clever atheism. I was dragged into belief, kicking and screaming. That night in 1931, after weeks of wrestling, I got into the sidecar of my brother Warnie's motorcycle and rode to Whipsnade Zoo. I barely spoke, but something changed in me along the way. I went in an unbeliever. I came out believing, not in all of Christianity yet, but in God, a first crack in the armor, and soon Christ followed, not as a theory, not as a metaphor, but as the myth made real, the word made flesh, and the joy made man. I once thought imagination was the enemy of truth, but what if imagination was the scout for reason? What if it prepared the soil of the soul so that truth could take root? That's what happened to me. When I finally surrendered to Christ, it was as if the world had come alive again. Stories once dismissed as lies now rang with echoes of glory. The old myths of dragons and heroes, of enchanted woods and noble quests, became sacred again. I saw that fairy tales were not childish things, they were maps, not of geography, but of the soul. When I wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, I was not retreating from theology, I was expressing it. Myth, imagination, fantasy, they were not escapes from reality, they were ways to see reality more clearly. As G.K. Chesterton said, fairy tales do not tell children dragons exist, they already know that. Fairy tales tell them dragons can be killed, and I had found the dragon slayer. The heart of all great stories is this: the hero dies to save others. From Hercules to Horus, the pattern repeats, but only in shadows. In Christ, the shadow became substance. He was not merely a dying God, he was the creator of life, submitting to death, not in mythic time, but in our time, not on Olympus or Asgard, but on a Roman cross outside Jerusalem. This is what makes Christianity different. It does not merely echo truth, it is truth. History and myth converge in one event. Time and eternity kiss in one moment. The immortal becomes mortal, so that the mortal may become immortal. It was, and is, the one story that rewrites all others. For years I worshipped reason as though it were God. I believed that logic could uncover every truth, that intellect could unlock every door. But I learned something unsettling. Reason is a tool, not a compass. It can build cathedrals or gas chambers.
it can prove geometry, but not love. It can weigh the stars but not explain why we weep when we watch them fall. Reason alone cannot tell you why beauty wounds us with longing, or why we are moved by sacrifice, or why we crave justice in a universe that seems indifferent. Imagination fills this gap, not because it opposes reason, but because it completes it. Myth, you see, carries truths that logic alone cannot bear. The heart must have its reasons, and mine were pointing towards something beyond the merely rational. Modern age scoffs at myth. We believe in statistics, not stories. We have replaced wonder with cynicism, but what has it gained us? We are more informed, and more lost, more connected, and more alone, more advanced, and more afraid. A society without myth is a society without memory, and when we strip our culture of deeper meaning, we do not become enlightened, we become blind, blind to beauty, blind to goodness, blind to God. I saw this clearly in the abolition of man, how we were training people to reject the very values that made them human. We mock old stories, not realizing they are the foundation beneath our feet, and when the stories die, so do we, slowly from the inside. What is it that makes a child stare at the stars in silence? What makes a grown man weep at a piece of music, or a line of verse? What makes a soul gasp when standing before the sea? It is wonder, the lost language of heaven. When I came to believe in Christ, not as myth, but as the myth become fact, the world did not grow smaller, it grew infinite. The grey world of cause and effect became a canvas splashed with glory. Every tree hinted at the garden, every sunrise whispered of resurrection, every act of love, no matter how small, echoed eternity. As I wrote in The Weight of Glory, we are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and ambition, when infinite joy is offered us. To believe in the true myth is to awaken, to see, truly see the world again. Have you ever wondered what it means to belong to a story, to live not as the author but as a character? That's what faith is. We do not write the plot, we inhabit it. We do not control the narrative, we discover it, and sometimes the story takes turns we do not understand. There is pain, loss, silence, but the author knows the ending, and he does not waste words. When I look back at my life, the joy and the sorrow, the myths and the arguments, the mistakes and the miracles, I see it all differently now. It was not random, it was written, and the story is not over. In my later years, I wrote of a land called Narnia, a place beyond the wardrobe, beyond war, beyond the weariness of this world. But Narnia was not just a fantasy, it was a longing made visible, a picture of heaven, of home. In the last battle, I wrote, all their life in this world had only been the cover and the title page. Now at last they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. I believed that, still do. This life, beautiful as it is not the end, it is only the beginning. The true myth does not end in death, it ends, or rather begins in joy beyond joy, in life beyond life, in the real Narnia. You may still ask, as I once did, is this true, or is it merely a beautiful dream? And I say to you what I once said to myself, what if it's both? What if the dream is real? What if our deepest longings were not lies but prophecies? What if the myth of Christ is not the story we made up about God, but the story God told about himself? And what if, right now, that same story is calling you? You may be standing as I once stood, at the edge of belief. You may feel the ache, the longing, the unbearable joy of wanting more than this world. Then listen, not just to reason, but to your heart, to your imagination, to that myth that feels too beautiful to be true because it is true. I once believed myths were lies, now I believe they are memories, and Christ is the one who made them flesh. The myth became fact, and that changed everything, even me.